Star Trek answered a big question about Kirk's retirement. 28 years later, Star Trek Lower Decks answered a big question about Captain James T. Kirk's William Shatner retirement 28 years after Star Trek Generations. Kirk met Captain Jean-Luc Picard, Patrick Stewart, in 1994's Star Trek Generations, but the historical team-up of the greatest captains of the Enterprise resulted in Kirk's death at the hands of Dr. Tolian Saran, Malcolm McDowell. However, Star Trek Generations gave a glimpse into the brief, restless retirement of Captain Kirk and when that happened. Star Trek Generations saw Captain Kirk enter the Nexus, an interdimensional space ribbon where time has no meaning. When Captain Picard found Kirk, Jim believed he had just arrived moments earlier. In Kirk's recollection, he was aboard the USS Enterprise B, performing a daring rescue when the bulkhead disappeared. Next thing Kirk knew, he was chopping wood outside the home he retired to in Idaho. Kirk was puzzled at his surroundings because he sold this home years ago, but to whom wasn't revealed until Star Trek Lower Decks. Star Trek Lower Decks Season 3, Episode 8, Crisis Point 2, Paradoxus, included the surprise revelation that Captain Hikaru Sulu, George Takei, bought Captain Kirk's Idaho home. Kirk identified the house and barn as belonging to his uncle in Star Trek Generations, so it was always in the Kirk family before Sulu purchased it. Ensign Bradward Boimler, Jack Quaid, visited Sulu's home and barn in a dream while he was in the holodeck LARPing his movie Crisis Point 2, Paradoxus. Sulu even joked that Kirk had to go time travel or something. The man could never relax. While Boimler was dreaming when he met Sulu at Kirk's former Idaho home, Bradward is an expert on Starfleet history and trivia. It's probable that Boimler knew Kirk once lived in Idaho and sold his home to Sulu when he decided to end his retirement. After all, Boimler knew about the Nexus in Star Trek Generations. It's safe to call Star Trek Lower Decks establishing Sulu bought the home in Idaho the Nexus took Kirk to in Star Trek Generations as canon. Star Trek Generations time travel between the 23rd and 24th centuries via the Nexus can be confusing, as is when, exactly, Captain Kirk retired from Starfleet. When Kirk realized that the Nexus brought him to the past on the day he told his lover, Antonia, Lynn Salvatore, that he was going back to Starfleet, Jim dated it as 9 years ago, from the date he believed it to be, 2203. This was the year the prologue of Star Trek Generations when Captain Kirk was killed aboard the USS Enterprise B took place. According to Kirk's math in Star Trek Generations, he ended his retirement in 2284, 1 year before the events of Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan. This means every Star Trek movie starring Kirk, starting with The Wrath of Khan, took place after the scene Kirk and Picard played through in the Nexus in Star Trek Generations. It's unclear when exactly Kirk decided to retire from Starfleet, but it was after Star Trek, the motion picture, which took place at some point in the 2270s. It's also unknown how long Kirk was retired, but we know he lived in the house in Idaho he later sold to Sulu. Captain Kirk spent his prime years in outer space, exploring and saving the galaxy with Starfleet. Kirk defined himself by his first, best destiny when he was captain of the USS Enterprise. Although Kirk had multiple lovers as captain, Jim chose to commit himself to his starship and his crew. This means Kirk never married, and he only had one child, David Marcus Merritt Buttrick, who he fathered with Dr. Carol Marcus, B.B. Besh. But Kirk also acquiesced Carol that she raised David alone. In the vast lore of Star Trek, one of the enduring mysteries has been the fate of Captain James T. Kirk after his legendary tenure as captain of the USS Enterprise. While Kirk's adventures have spanned decades of television and film, his retirement, or what exactly would have constituted the end of his command, was never clearly defined. For years, fans speculated about Kirk's eventual exit from Starfleet, wondering if he would ever settle down or simply die in the chair. However, a recent turn in the Star Trek franchise answered this long-standing question nearly 28 years after it was first posed. To understand how this question was finally addressed, we need to revisit Kirk's final on-screen appearances. The year was 1994 when Star Trek Generations hit theaters, marking a pivotal moment in the Star Trek film series. In this movie, Kirk, played by William Shatner, shared the screen with Captain Jean-Luc Picard, the modern-day hero of Star Trek, The Next Generation. Kirk had already retired from active duty before the events of Generations, and the opening of the film depicted a ceremonial passing of the torch to a new captain of the Enterprise B. Despite his retirement, Kirk's story didn't end there. During the events of Generations, Kirk was swept into the Nexus, a temporal anomaly that allowed him to experience a kind of personal paradise. In the film's climax, Kirk emerged from the Nexus to assist Picard in stopping the villainous Dr. Saran, a heroic act that ultimately led to Kirk's demise. For nearly 3 decades, this conclusion to Kirk's arc seemed final. Kirk's death in Generations left many fans with mixed feelings. Some viewed it as a fitting end for the heroic captain, while others were left unsatisfied, feeling that Kirk's passing lacked the grandeur that such an iconic figure deserved. In the Star Trek universe, Kirk's death was never fully embraced as a true closure, given that the Nexus offered the potential for a reality-bending twist, and Kirk's legacy loomed too large to be confined to a single film. And so, for 28 years, the question of Kirk's ultimate retirement and the broader meaning of his exit from the stage of Star Trek hung in the air. That is, until Star Trek Picard arrived. The revival of Star Trek Picard, which began in 2020, presented an opportunity for the franchise to revisit and explore lingering questions surrounding its beloved characters. While Picard primarily focuses on the life and legacy of Jean-Luc Picard, the show also delves into the history of the Star Trek universe as a whole, including several callbacks to Kirk's era. The answer to Kirk's final fate came in an unexpected way during the show's later seasons, specifically in a discussion about Starfleet legends. In one particular episode set decades after Kirk's presumed death, a revelation about his post-Generations legacy is casually dropped. It's revealed that Starfleet, out of deep respect for Kirk's contributions, had preserved a contingency plan, a way to honor Kirk's service and offer him a proper retirement, even beyond the grave. This took the form of a classified project to retrieve his remains from the planet where he perished in Generations and bring him back to Earth for ceremonial purposes. The episode subtly references Starfleet's ability to clone or preserve individuals for future use, suggesting that Kirk's essence or consciousness might one day be revisited. This revelation doesn't explicitly depict Kirk returning from the dead, but leaves open the possibility that his story may continue in some form. The franchise, while careful to avoid undoing the dramatic weight of Kirk's sacrifice in Generations, offers a glimpse into how Starfleet views its heroes, not as mere mortals, but as enduring symbols whose legacies transcend time and space. The nature of Kirk's retirement in Picard reflects a nuanced understanding of his character. Kirk, who was always a man of action, never sought retirement in the traditional sense. For him, stepping away from the captain's chair wasn't a matter of aging or fading away, but of passing on his wisdom and spirit to future generations. The choice to revisit Kirk's legacy 28 years later emphasizes that, in the Star Trek universe, true legends never really retire. Instead, they live on in the hearts and minds of those who come after them. This subtle acknowledgement in Star Trek Picard, the idea that Kirk's final journey isn't truly over, resonates with the core philosophy of the franchise. In Star Trek, exploration is infinite, and the bold frontier never ceases to inspire new discoveries. Kirk may have made his final leap in Generations, but his story, like the very stars he explored, continues to shine bright. In this way, Star Trek finally answered the question about Kirk's retirement. It wasn't a traditional exit marked by a quiet life of leisure, but rather a continuation of his enduring impact on the galaxy and his symbolic immortality within Starfleet. Even 28 years later, Kirk's legacy remains as vibrant and influential as ever,